And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast. Oh my God. The Knicks-Sixers series is over. The final score after 6 games. The Knicks win the series by 1 combined point. Josh Hart. New York Knicks legend Josh Hart grabbing every rebound, making what essentially became the series clinching 3. Jalen Brunson, 35.5 points per game for the series, 40 plus in the last 3, 39 plus in the last 4, willing the shorthanded, injury-riddled Knicks across the finish line against Tyrese Maxey. A very game. Joel Embiid, 39 points, playing with all sorts of maladies. We had the game 2 Knicks crazy comeback. We had the game 5 Sixers crazy comeback. Last 2-minute reports, everything. I can barely function today, and yet it's still time to say the most anticipated 3 words in niche basketball podcasting. What up, Beck?
Good morning, Zach. That was an epic Lowe Post intro. That was awesome. I feel dizzy just reliving it just for 30 seconds.
Oh my God. I mean, think about the swings of the game. The Knicks come out 33-11. They're up. And it's like, oh wow. Did the Sixers just throw the last and only punch they had left in game 5 in Madison Square Garden when Tyrese Maxey hits the 2 crazy shots at the end of the game, one of which had a little travel, but you know, honestly, I don't care. It all evens out in the wash. And then they come roaring back at the end of the first quarter. Nick Batum hits a bunch of threes. The bench brigade starts to show up. Buddy Hield, it turns out, is alive and well and damn near saved the Sixers season. Maybe he should have been playing a little more throughout the series, although he didn't do anything before tonight. Maybe he should have played the entire fourth quarter instead of Tobias Harris, who scored 0 points. And he came in for about a 2 or 3 minute stint late in the game. Also continued to score 0 points and missed a shot during that time. What a coda to the. I'm gonna just take a stab at it, Howard, and say the Tobias Harris era in Philadelphia is over. I don't even know. I'm not even.
Are we sure it didn't end 2 weeks ago? 3 months ago?
He had an okay game in game 5. And honestly, like these role guys like DiVincenzo hitting a bunch of threes was huge in game 6, including, I thought, one of the biggest shots of the game, talking about the swings. Philly comes roaring back. They're up 71-61 in the third quarter. And now it feels like, man, maybe the Knicks, this is the price you pay for having 7 dudes left that are playing, and all of them playing 1,000 minutes a game. Maybe they threw their last best punch earlier in the series and in the first quarter, and they just can't get over the finish line. And DiVincenzo hits a 3 on a dribble handoff where Tobias Harris and somebody else, I can't remember, botch a switch. And really, to DiVincenzo's credit, he pulled up right with the handoff, hits a 3, kind of calms the game down. But yeah, the end of the Tobias Harris era, it went out in a blaze of glory. I don't even remember, honestly, what I was. Oh, and just like the wild swings up and down, and the Knicks go up 109-101 on an insane OG Anunoby dunk where Joel Embiid in the fourth quarter, every game, just can't quite summon the rim protection. Although in his defense, in game 5, he made 3 massive defensive plays in overtime of that game. And OG Anunoby just detonates all over the city of Philadelphia, the Liberty Bell, Ben Franklin, the stupid blue dog, everybody, and it feels like it's over. He misses the free throw. Kelly Oubre does some Kelly Oubre stuff. Tyrese Maxey does some Tyrese Maxey stuff. There's a goaltend that was really hard to tell even on slow motion replay if it was a goaltend or not. And suddenly the game is tied, and then Josh Hart is like, okay, guess I got to shoot. Guess I got to shoot with the whole goddamn season maybe on the line, and I'm going to make it. And then it becomes a free throw contest from there because, damn it, Tom Thibodeau was not going to find himself in a situation where his team failed to foul up 3, even when there was a lot of time left on the clock. We have more than enough to win. And when they
Does that hurt, by the way? I worry for your vocal cords sometimes. Does your Tibbs impression? I worry it hurts.
I love when they zoom in on Tibbs after the Knicks do something bad, and he's just like, he has this stone face. Like, I've talked about the Doc Rivers tension face where his whole face tightens up and it feels like it's just going to crack. Tibbs has this cranky, just, it's a stone face. Like, it doesn't move, but it's just like, exasperated Tibbs. And last night, the camera caught him at some point after the Knicks made a statement. Come on, man. Come on, man. Where do you want to start with this? And now, okay, so let's, I mean, on the other side of the bracket, the Pacers eliminate the Bucks. Yep. No Giannis. Dame gave it an effort, scored 28 points, did not look anything like Damian Lillard, had no juice, no explosiveness, sending the Bucks plummeting into an offseason of disappointment and maybe uncertainty, and rekindling a 90s rivalry. Pacers-Knicks, the second fastest paced team in the league against the slowest paced team in the league, a physical, nasty offensive rebounding machine against more of a finesse speed team. That's where we are in the East. We got a couple more games tonight we'll talk about later. We have Clippers on the brink. We have Heat are out facing a whole bunch of uncertainty. Bucks are out facing a whole bunch of uncertainty. Everything's fine in Phoenix. Everything's going great. Just ask Matt Ishbia. Every GM in the league would trade their situation for the. I actually think he said 26. 26 GMs would trade their situations for our situation. And you know what? If you start counting the teams, don't think so, Matt Ishbia. Darvin Ham is just hanging in the wind in Los Angeles. We got a lot to talk about, but we got to start Knicks-Sixers. Where do you want to go?
Real quick aside on the HBA thing. I actually, if we actually could coordinate as the media, and we don't, and we can't, and we're bad at this, I really actually would like all 29 other teams, obviously anonymously. I want to hear all of them weigh in so that we can actually have the 28 out of 29 or 29 of 29 who say absolutely positively not. We do not want to trade places with the Suns.
Hey, do you want a list right off the bat? Boston, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, New York, Denver, probably Houston, probably New Orleans, probably Utah, probably Orlando. San Antonio, they could call San Antonio and say, we will trade you every single player on our team.
And all our golf courses.
Our arena, our golf courses, an autographed Dan Marley jersey, a game-worn Cotton Fitzsimmons suit, Steve Nash's bloody tissue from when he got a bloody nose, the scorer's table where Robert Horry checked Steve Nash into everything for Wembanyama, and the Spurs already hung up the phone 10 things ago. Okay, I'm sorry.
It was ludicrous on its face. No, it's
everything's fine. Everything's going great in Phoenix. We won 0 playoff games, none, not one. Yeah. But really, we're just a tweak away from winning 1 playoff game. How about not getting blown out in every playoff game? Okay, right. Knicks-Sixers. This takes its place with Celtics Bulls 2009. I'm always partial to Spurs Clippers 2015 because I thought it was 2 absolute elite championship level teams playing at such a high level. And a couple others that I'm probably blanking on is just one of the greatest first round series of all time, despite not going to game 7. And it's hard to get that designation not going to a game 7. Just an unbelievable, every single second of it was wrenching and tense and physical, and you're like, man, it's kind of a miracle somebody won this series. It has to continue playing basketball now.
That the entire point differential for the entire 6-game series was 1 point. I mean, it literally does not get any closer than that, Zach, mathematically, I believe. If I think
that is the lowest possible scoring margin you can have in a playoff series.
I think so. It's incredible.
I might have to check with Matt Ishbia on that. Maybe there's something more special than that.
He's got a different kind of math he's using. No, absolutely incredible. I was there for 2 of the 3 games at the Garden. The place was just absolutely bonkers. And I credit to the Sixers, at least from what I could tell on TV last night. It seems like the strategy to buy out 2,000, 2,500 tickets from the secondary market and give them to Sixer fans kind of worked. Like, you could still hear Knicks fans, but it wasn't nearly like it was prior to that. So that was interesting. Never seen that before.
Do they get a banner for that?
Sure. Yeah, I think they should, frankly. Why not?
Would you rate that as more or less of an accomplishment of finally making the conference finals during the Joel Embiid era?
Oh, boy. So, Embiid. You want to start with Embiid?
No, I don't. I want to start with Brunson. I want to start with Brunson and the Knicks because they toughed this out. They earned this series victory when it looked like they were on the ropes in game 3. And you just look at the characters in this series. Jalen Brunson, Mavs didn't want to overpay him, quote unquote. He just averaged 36 points in a playoff series. And after the first 2 games, and I said on NBA Today after game 2, I like the shots, a lot of the shots that Brunson is getting. After the first 2 games, he just erupted. And it wasn't the most efficient, but it was efficient enough for a team that without Randall just doesn't have a lot of juice. OG Anunoby. Just the little snippets of self-creation on the pick and roll, a couple of long twos here and there. And I thought Tibbs moving him off of Maxey so that he can be a help defender on the back line was a really nice adjustment, and he made an impact on several pivotal plays as the last line of defense. And Dante DiVincenzo eventually took the Tyrese Maxey assignment and did quite well in the last 2 games of the series. OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam now have a reunion in the second round of the playoffs after the Raptors traded both of them. The Raptors are going to get laughed at over the next 2 weeks for selling low on these 2 guys who have been massively impactful in the playoffs. I think the Siakam trade is going to end up a sell low. Now we have to see where Siakam, and I think the Raptors would probably admit, like, we waited an extra year on these guys. And maybe that costs us. Siakam is going to end up moving for 3 potentially bad first round draft picks. That's not nothing, but there's not a golden chip in there. We'll see if they ever turn Bruce Brown into anything. Anunoby, look, I was stunned at the time. I said it at the time. How many people thought the Raptors got the best player in that trade, or it was like relatively equal? To me, there was no comparison. OG Anunoby was the best player in the trade, but RJ Barrett played fantastically for the Raptors, and Emmanuel Quickley is really good. So we'll see. But I do want to start with the Knicks and just, I mean, it's almost the level of toughness and physicality is just incredibly uncomfortable to play against. I mean, they had a 40% offensive rebounding rate in the series, and Joel Embiid was very limited. He just could not find Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson on the glass, couldn't move to go get them. But they are just unrelenting. And honestly, I don't understand how they're all not physically spent and exhausted. I don't know what the hell they're doing in practice to get ready for this, but Indiana is a little less physically tapped out after their first round series. They fly around the floor, but they're about to get hit with a freight train of physicality, and it's going to be a major test for the Pacers. How do they respond to like what's about to collide with them?
So you grew up in the Northeast, so you were around for like the 90s Knicks in a way that
all my friends were Knicks fans, all of them.
So I only saw those teams from a distance from California, but I have a very strong sense, especially having now lived here for 20 years, of what the 90s Knicks were, partially from watching them in real time at a distance, partially from obviously just being immersed in New York sports stuff for the last 20 years. The beauty of this Knicks team, Zach, they very much feel like this doesn't happen very often. And sometimes we do these dumb thing as sports media where we superimpose certain themes or impressions that it's a little forced. This is not forced. Like, the beauty of this Knicks team, they didn't know that Brunson was going to be essentially a superstar when they got him. He's not John Starks, right? But every bit of this team feels like it's a second round pick. Actually, it's almost all second round picks right now. It's guys who have bounced around the league. It's some homegrown guys. But there's nothing about this that felt like manufactured. And the beauty of this Knicks team, in terms of especially the way the city has responded to them, partially it's the way they play, and a toughness and a grit and a relentlessness and just a business-like approach that very much does some in the 90s in a lot of ways, maybe a little less physicality than back then. But there's a genetic strand there that I think people really respond to. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect in this series, to be honest. And a lot of that has to do with not knowing what to expect from the Sixers and Embiid in particular. And, look, this thing went down to like one last buddy-heeled heave from possibly going to a game 7. I do wonder if they're spent. I do sometimes wonder if, especially like last night, I even saw, Knicks fans starting to fret a little bit early fourth quarter about Tibbs has tightened the rotation too much. Like, these guys are just going to collapse.
Well, we didn't. We barely saw Deuce McBride until in the second half.
But I mean,
he's guy number 7.
I know it wasn't their elimination game; it was to eliminate. But like in an elimination game, you've got a chance to put a team away, and you want to just go with 6 guys. Like, I get it. If it's the guys you trust the most. Josh Hart made a comment recently to. I'm going to screw this up. I can't remember if it was to Fred Katz or Stefan Bondi, or maybe it was the whole Knicks beat, but just about the idea that for all the flack that Tibbs takes about minutes and running guys into the ground and this and that, He's saying, like, we're good. We're fine. I'm fine right now playing 48 minutes because we conditioned for this all season. And the Knicks now stand as a really interesting kind of counterexample or pushback to the load management era, where maybe it is just a matter of being ready for this.
It's the readiness, but I was also talking to a couple of agents about this recently, and they said, well, Zach, think about it. Wouldn't you love it? You get to play almost the whole game. You get to accumulate these stats that are not inflated, but like Josh Hart wouldn't average like 13 rebounds a game if you were playing a normal amount of minutes. And that I was like, that's kind of interesting. It's probably fun to be out there giving everything you got the whole time. And just, I mean, I to your point, I think game one against the Pacers, Precious Achiuwa's got to play. Like, I'm dusting off Alec Burks. I'm stretching out the rotation for the first couple games of the series unless it goes really, really bad, because I just got to see in this matchup, can these guys give me something, particularly with Bogdanovich now joining Randall on the injured list? That's a big deal. Like, I can't go into this game one like I went into Philly game 5 and 6.
This hit me at one point last night. This is going to sound obnoxious, but it hit me, so I'll just say it. Like, for all the great things that the Knicks have done over the last couple of years, not only on the court, but just in terms of the front office and the choices they've made, Obi Toppin looked really good for the Pacers last night. And with no Julius Randle, like, you can't help but think, like, man, this is a guy you gave away. And I know, like, it wasn't working, and there were issues between Tibbs and Toppin, and it just was getting a little bit tense and all this stuff. But, like, man, what a great backup for he would have.
Well, and ironically, like, a lot of Obi Toppin's minutes are coming in a sort of no center alignment with Pascal Siakam as the 4 and the 5, which is what Knicks fans always, and I did too, always clamored for. Like, can we get some Toppin Randall minutes into? Oh, I saw the lineup data. Anyone check the lineup data? We try everything in practice. My Tibbs impression needs work.
I'm telling you.
And by the way, I'm not making fun of Tibbs. Like, that's how he talks. And by the way, as I've said many times on this podcast, you want to win basketball games? Hire Tom Thibodeau as your coach, because the record suggests you're going to win more basketball games with him than you did before you got him. And now they're in the second round of the playoffs again. The Obi Toppin reunion. Obviously, we get a Knicks-Pacers Reggie Miller reunion. Hopefully, like, there's a whole lot of history here.
Well, and the ghost of Roy Hibbert blocking Carmelo Anthony in 2014, which I think what was that? That was game 6, I believe. Was it 2013?
2013, the 54 win, the 54 win Knicks team that has taken on a slightly outsized place in Knicks lore, just because of there isn't a lot of Knicks lore since the 1999 finals.
No. But no, I mean, it's interesting because you think Knicks Pacers, of course, immediately it's Reggie Miller versus Spike Lee, and it's all the stuff from the 90s. But it's an interesting kind of moment in between. Like, they didn't have a whole lot of, they haven't had a whole lot to celebrate in the last, 20 years. But, like, that 54 win season was a moment. It was a really big moment, and Roy Hibbert kind of ruined it. So some belated revenge here potentially for the Knicks. Maybe a little bit of Wally Szczerbiak versus Tyrese Halliburton revival. I don't know.
Oh, I forgot about that. What did he call him? A fake all-star?
Wannabe fake all-star, I believe. I think he is
not even just fake. A wannabe fake. That's like when Perk. That's like when Perk makes his big list of real, legit playoff stars or something. It's real and legit. So he's a wannabe and a fake all-star. Turns out, actually, Tyrese Halliburton is a real all-star, and that's kind of awesome, even though he hasn't been the same guy since his hamstring injury.
Wally did retract or apologize, I believe, after the fact. So
if you call someone a fake all-star, like a fake all-star, and they're not a fake all-star, you kind of got to own that one. And that was about Brunson. That was about Brunson, that competition for an all-star spot. And so here they are again, too. I mean, it's hard to think of two teams who are more of a contrast in styles and 2 point guards who are more of a contrast in styles than these two guys.
Yeah. And of course, Halliburton also taken after Obi Toppin. So there's that thing. It just sounds obnoxious now. I don't want to nitpick the Knicks. They've done an incredible job. But for the last couple of years, especially before the Knicks rose again, Knicks fans were like, and fans of a lot of teams were like, my God, we could have had Halliburton.
Have they done such an incredible job, though, Howard, that they wouldn't trade teams with the Phoenix Suns? They're not one of the 20. They're not one of the 26 teams. Would Man City trade teams with the Phoenix Suns?
I don't think the bodega around the corner from me is trading places with the Phoenix Suns right now.
Let's talk about Embiid. I said earlier this week that it's like I called him the tragic hero of the NBA before the series. I said, actually in the early part of the series, that it's every year with these ill-timed injuries and broken faces and knee injuries and face masks, and obviously the organizational trauma that the Philadelphia 76ers and their slew of failed number one picks have inflicted upon Joel Embiid is the stuff of NBA anti-legend at this point. The playoff flameouts, the pass, the inability to get out of the conference finals, the Kawhi shot, the Jimmy Butler on the team looks awesome, suddenly plays for the Heat. Al Horford suddenly plays for the Sixers. That didn't work out great. Then I said after all of the grabbing of the legs and the stepping on the legs and the groin kick and hitting Brunson in the face, that he was almost kind of becoming the tragic villain of the NBA in the span of a week. And part of that was, I think, the perception that once again, he shrunk a little bit in the absolute biggest moments of a playoff series. Now, I don't know that outside of game 5, when he just threw the ball all over the gym and looked like a train wreck in Madison Square Garden, I don't know how fair that was, considering he's clearly hampered by a knee injury. He has Bell's palsy, like just the Mad Libs of crap that happens to Joel Embiid in the playoffs is crazy. By the way, Bell's palsy can be very severe. It's not a laughing matter. One of our friends of our family got it suddenly out of nowhere last year, and it was an ordeal. He averaged 33 points a game in the series, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 turnovers, 44% shooting, 33% on threes, just 49% on twos. The Sixers, for what feels like the gazillionth straight playoff series, plus 47 with Embiid on the floor, minus 46 with Embiid off the floor. Just can't ever do anything when Embiid's off the floor, despite the fact that they stack the deck in those lineups. Every other good player on the team is on the floor when Embiid is on the bench, and it still doesn't matter. He had issues defensive rebounding. We talked about it. I think he had 50 points in game 3 of the series. He had 50 points. Like I'm okay with his performance in the series, given the maladies. I will say this though. He was 6 of 26 in the fourth quarter for the series. And more problematic to me, and I don't know if you felt this, I saw a couple people on Twitter saying this, so maybe I'm not crazy. It didn't look like he really wanted the ball or wanted to look at the rim late in game 5 and late last night in game 6. It felt like he didn't want to shoot. And what he wants to do is get off the ball and or try to draw fouls, like grift for fouls a little bit. And that happened in game 4 too. Remember, he had that wide open mid-range jumper off and out of bounds play, passed it up, and just sort of like ran into Precious Achiuwa hoping for a foul. He doesn't seem super comfortable shooting and looking at the rim and playing like normal offensive basketball in the hottest moments of these games. And like, that's a very human thing. I get it. Like, I'm not, but that's something that I'm bookmarking for the future. But I thought, all things considered, like, he's going to get crapped on a little bit for losing in the first round again, for shooting poorly by his standards, for turning the ball over all the time. I thought he gave it everything his body would allow him to give it. There were some hiccups here and there for sure. The turnovers were a disaster. Even yesterday, he had like 4 and just insane. Like, what happened on that pass? Who were you passing to? Why did it go 10 rows into the crowd? Turnovers. Ultimately, the Sixers just didn't have enough talent around Maxey and Embiid, I think, to make a really long playoff run. And that the question now becomes in the offseason, do they get that talent? How long do they really have now with Joel Embiid, both in terms of his health? Is his desire to like remain in Philadelphia for the rest of his career? And just sort of just like, how long does this window actually stay open? We know they have $1 gazillion of cap space. We know Paul George has not signed an extension with the Clippers. And by the way, we'll talk about the Clippers, but all indications I've had, and I haven't checked in the last 10 days, where a lot of stuff has changed for the Clippers, is, yeah, they're negotiating. if the Clippers had offered a deal that Paul George would take, he would have taken it by now. He hasn't. Still think he chose that place. He's from the LA area. I think he wants to be there. But if I'm him, I'm starting to look around. If this is just me, this is just purely me, Zach Lowe, imagining being Paul George. Like, this other guy is hurt every year. Like, if I want to win, is this the best place for me? And if I'm the Sixers and I get a chance to meet with him in free agency, that's what I'm pitching. I'm pitching like, your guy's hurt all the time. We got two guys here. One of them's hurt a lot, but he's also awesome. But they gotta, like, the clock is ticking one way or another on the Sixers Embiid era, and this summer is make or break. I think this is, if it's not it already, this summer is it. They have to nail it, and I don't know what the solution is.
So I'll start with this. I feel like I was very much the minority view here, and I felt this from the start of this series between the Knicks and Sixers, that while Joel Embiid was taking all these shots from people for like, oh, he's fading in fourth quarters and he's not, he's losing the rebounding battle to Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson and everything else, plus all the antics, and like, there's no waving away the antics, and antics doesn't even do it justice, because there was some pretty obnoxious and dangerous stuff in there, right? He could have really hurt Mitchell Robinson badly on the leg grab and all that. There was just a lot of stuff going on. But where I think I saw this differently, Zach, is that, like, do you see how big that freaking brace is on his knee? Do you know how many games he played over the last, like, 3 months of the season? Like, he was back.
Also, he came back and saved your season. As soon as he came back, he went 8-0. He couldn't win any games. They were like a 33% winning percentage team without him.
Joel Embiid came back on April 2nd after all those months off, and played 5 regular season games before the playoffs. So the idea that he maybe wasn't going to be in great shape come the fourth quarter, especially as much like you have to acknowledge, if the fourth quarters looked really bad, it's partially because the first 3 quarters in a lot of those games looked really good. And you'd think, well, why can't he sustain? Well, because I don't think the conditioning is there. And the knee, everybody tells me the knee is sound. He did not come back too soon or anything like that, but he did come back at a time where he did not have a lot of time to get back to 100% conditioning or get comfortable with it. It's clear the knee was bothering him. I don't know about you, Zach. I was watching game 1 from home, but when Embiid, threw the ball off the backboard to himself and then came down and was laying on the court, like, I thought that was it. I thought we weren't going to see him again until November at the earliest. And like, it's perspective is important here. I could not believe, and I was talking to the Philly writers a lot during the games that I was at the Garden, and like, it sounds like there's a lot of Sixer fans who are just really down on Embiid, and I get it. Like, it's a Groundhog Day thing. It's like every year something goes wrong. Every year he's hurt. Every year we lose sooner than we should in the playoffs and all this. But like, to me, I don't think Joel Embiid's actually getting enough credit for just like gutting through the knee, the Bell's palsy, and God only knows what else was going on. He was mostly awesome. And then in fourth quarters, and especially some tight moments, he was not. But I think that that's not an indictment of his character or his play or his competitiveness or being afraid of the moment. I think this was not 100% Joel Embiid, unless we forget he actually looked better than he did in his MVP season before he got hurt earlier this year.
Well, and we had this whole discussion on Get Up yesterday. Like, is this Tyrese Maxey's team now? Is Embiid the Robin of this team? Everyone loves the Batman and Robin. Is there another superhero duo that we can go to where there's like a clear 1A and 1B? Like, yeah. There's got to be something else, because Robin stinks. Nobody likes Robin. Does anybody like Robin? Has anyone ever been like, who's awesome? Robin. Nobody likes Robin. Robin sucks. Batman should have ditched Robin many iterations of Batman ago.
Robin's nothing without Batman. He's been riding his coattails for
imagine if
decades.
Batman was just like, you know what, Robin, I think it's time to go our separate ways. You can fight crime by yourself, or like find another. Robin would be like, I guess I'm just gonna go get a job at the bank. Like, I can't do this.
I can't wait for the backlash that's coming from like the Robin stance. There's like going to be some little pocket of like Robin apologists out there who are going to come for you now.
Literally no one has ever been like, Robin is my guy. And I said, like, I get that Tyrese Maxey just had an insane, awesome crunch time game, and the guy wants the moment. Like, he's ready for them. He's a superstar. That's If one good thing happened to the Sixers this year, it's that Tyrese Maxey is a minted superstar in the NBA.
Also, by the way, an incredibly magnetic personality as a player and overall. Like there's, I've run this by a few people just to, I don't want to sound like I'm crazy. And people are like, no, that's right. Like there's a little bit of a Steph Curry vibe, not playing style by any stretch. They're very, very different players, but the joy thing, right? We use that term all the time with the Warriors and Steph. And like, there's something about Maxey, the way he plays the game. It's not just that he's amazing and you're constantly sitting there going, wow, I cannot believe he just, made this like running 15-footer fading over the baseline. It's that there's just this kind of magnetism about his game and his personality. He just seems like he'd be a lot of fun to have as your teammate, which is no small thing.
And he and Embiid gradually developed what is now, I would say, A- to A level chemistry on the pick and roll. The Knicks didn't really have a great answer for their 2-man game, and that's also massively encouraging. But I said, like, on the Robin thing, like, I understand he had a huge game. Game 5 was unbelievable. He wants all of it. We're 2 months removed, 3 months removed from Joel Embiid averaging the most points per minute of any player ever to play basketball in the NBA. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit on like have the Sixers and Maxey kind of passed him by as a number one option. I will say, if he's on the team next year and is on the team for the next 2-3 years, and they continue to tweak around him and Maxey, it's time for him to be a 50 to 55 game regular season player. Like it's just every
Embiid.
year. Yeah, it's every year. It's every year with this. And the only thing, like, if they want to win a title, he just has to be healthy in the playoffs. And whatever you can do to make that happen, I don't care if it's about the 65 game rule and MVPs. Like, you just got to make that happen.
Look, Daryl Morey gets, tagged a lot for just, chasing superstars. Of course, every GM in the league wants superstars. If you have one, you try to get two. If you have two, you try to get three, and all that stuff. And I know
that's why 26 GMs would trade places with the Suns right now, Howard.
But part of the reason I think that the Sixers were in a little bit of a bind with Embiid hobbled is that this was almost by design, right? Like, there are moves they probably could have made last summer at the trade deadline. Daryl clearly was aiming for this offseason and trying to protect their cap room. And not necessarily because you're going to sign somebody in free agency, although maybe, because guys don't change teams in free agency very often anymore, superstars. But they've got the ability to take on money in trades too and make imbalanced trades. This is the first summer, I shouldn't say it as first summer, but this is the summer where we're going to really start to see the effects of this new CBA and second apron and all this stuff. Like, I'm wondering, like, is part of the strategy here simply for the Sixers to say, you know what, teams are going to have to like sell for pennies on the dollar on some of these players. And whether that's a star or whether that's a collection of higher level role players than what we've got, they're going to be in a position to help teams out who are suddenly facing money crunches, tax crunches, apron crunches, all that stuff. So but they planned for this. And so I think maybe they hurt themselves in the short term by not having enough to lean on, especially once Embiid was banged up. But they're in a great position. Like, I can't even believe that there are people who are suggesting like like this is the summer that they should be trading Embiid and getting out of the Joel Embiid business and like pivot to Max. Like, I think that's insanity. Joel Embiid, if not for the knee, we might be sitting here talking about him as a two-time MVP. Maxey is just now becoming the superstar that he is. And they've got the ability to go out and get, whether it's Paul George, whether maybe they sweep in and steal Anunoby. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's a name that was floated to me. There are options for them, all kinds of options. Brandon Ingram, whether the Pelicans breakup seems to be imminent.
I'll tell you this. I know, knowing Daryl Morey, he'll call about Durant. Vultures of Circle Phoenix, he'll be a vulture.
Yeah.
But the who is important because a lot of the who's were taken up by extensions and trades, and we don't need to go through all the who's. But they need, part of the reason they need to nail this offseason for lots of reasons. Number 3 on the list is probably like, I do wonder if we can always, if he ever asks for it or wanted out, or we decided it was time, well, we know we can trade Embiid for 2 A+ young players 4 first-round picks, unprotected, 4 pick swaps. Obviously, they would get a lot for Joel Embiid. I do wonder if just the endless injuries and the fact that a lot of them are now repetitive with the knee. There are definitely going to be some teams who are like, he's 30, 31 now with all this mileage. Like, I don't know that we could, you got to be ready to win day one if you're going to fork over all that for Embiid. And we've seen with these teams who think they're ready to win day one, it ain't that easy. The Suns won no playoff games. The Bucks won 2 playoff games. Obviously, injuries for them were, but it's not that simple as, Kevin Durant's available, we get Kevin Durant. That's it. But okay, I mean, there are costs to it. There's optionality out the window. There's future out the window. There's age. There's injuries. I don't remember. Oh, I mean, you mentioned their cap space. I'm just going to throw this out. The options, they got to find some options, Howard, because I don't think Anunoby's going to leave the Knicks. I don't think Siakam's going to leave the Pacers. Drew Holiday's been extended. Paul George, LA's sitting there. Just going to say they do have enough cap space to absorb Ben Simmons' contract. That's this, Markelle Fultz is also entering free agency this summer. Any other thoughts on the Sixers? And the Knicks. I mean, just
yeah.
It's one of these series we're going to talk about forever. It was just a delight from start to finish. Not even. It was the best kind of delight because it was a delight, but also like kind of agonizing for everybody involved.
Yeah, and it's first of all rare. You listed a bunch of them at the top of the show, but it's rare like that we're thinking about, wow, an all-time classic, and it was a first-round series, right? The stakes are necessarily lower. And part of this is that the Sixers should have never been a 7 seed in the first place. They're not your average 7 seed. And so, like, there's that aspect of it. Joel Embiid laboring and at times looking, like a shadow of himself, and at times looking like, Wilt Chamberlain. Like, he was incredible at times. And so there were just so many things, the finishes to these games. I don't know, you listed it all at the top. It was incredible. And, the Knicks have been absolutely amazing. They have the right to throw their own what ifs into this of, starting with Julius Randle being hurt. Although, more than one person I've talked to around the league in the last several weeks has, brought up the idea that, maybe they're not getting this level of Brunson if Randle's there, which fair. Randle takes up some space and usage and possessions, and their spacing is better, arguably, without him. But that's a discussion for another day, and for the Knicks to discuss whenever their offseason may arrive, which is not going to be soon.
I don't think their spacing is markedly better without him, just because of the way teams are going to guard Josh Hart. I do think, I've said all year, I understand that their record with Brunson and Anunoby is unbelievable, with or without Randle. I've said all year, for them to make the finals, I think they need Randle, just the extra bit of shot creation. You feel
I agree.
it.
Yeah.
This was a good offensive series. I think they put up a 117 offensive rating in this series, which would have been like 5th or 4th or 8th, 7th or something in the regular season. They put up a 129 last night. It didn't feel like that. That's a monster number. A lot of that is offensive rebounding. They're very dependent on offensive rebounding. And if they can ever find a team who takes that away, they're going to be in trouble. The Pacers are 26th in defensive rebounding for the season. So the Pacers are probably not that team, at least in that aspect, that will give the Knicks trouble. I do think to beat Boston, they would need everybody, all hands on deck.
Absolutely.
And the biggest, it sounds crazy because Porzingis is hurt and we don't know exactly when Porzingis is going to come back. I think they're being intentionally vague about it. I don't think the Celtics need Porzingis to make the finals. I think they need him to win the finals. The East is such a mash unit, right? I mean, Milwaukee's gone. Philly's gone. The Knicks are playing 7 guys. Cleveland is just trying to gut out this Orlando series right now, and looks good one night, like a lottery team the next night. I think the Celtics can survive the East without Porzingis. I don't think, whether it's Denver, Minnesota, whoever, Dallas, Clipper, Oklahoma City, whoever ends up coming out, I think they'll need Porzingis for that series. But they're looking around the East like, man, it's like this Heat series, they lost that game too. The rest of it was like preseason games for them, basically. Okay, let's talk about some teams who are out and on the verge of being out. Let's start with the Bucks. Good news, Chris Middleton looked awesome. 25 a game, 48% shooting. Bad news, Dame got hurt and is only going to get older. Giannis missed the entire series, and their young players contributed next to nothing. Part of that is on Doc Rivers. I couldn't believe that Andre Jackson Jr. did not get in the game last night until it was essentially over. Beauchamp has just vanished from the earth. They don't have a ton of draft assets. They don't have a ton of young players. They're just older and thinner. And Bobby Portis is extension eligible. Brook Lopez is a year older. And look, Dame was pretty eloquent after the game last night, talking about how he's excited for next season. That they needed time and rhythm and they didn't get it. And he still thinks that there's something here. And clearly there is. When their best players are all on the floor, their four best guys, they were a dominant team. They're just never on the floor together. And they were never an elite team for more than 4 games at a time at any point this season. Their defense, their offense, it was one thing, it was another thing. They were under 500 against Doc Rivers. It's very hard to look at the full dossier of evidence of Milwaukee Bucks 23-24 and say, oh yeah, if this is a championship team. It just isn't there. And it's nice that Dame is talking about next year. It's nice that Ishbia is talking about next year and how the expectation was never to win in year 1. We can't microwave it. It's year 2, year 3. When you trade all this stuff, it is year 1. It is time. You can't afford to have a slip up in year 1. It is win now immediately. You can spin it the other way when you don't win now in year 1. But look, I don't know. I know as other people have said, the other 29 teams are going to be crossing their fingers, hoping Giannis saw all this and is like, oh, maybe I do need to look around elsewhere. I don't know what is going to happen. I know that if I'm a Bucks fan, I'm hoping he just looks at this season and is like, I just got to throw this one in the trash bin of history and come back next year. It's a wash. Like we fired our coach. It was a disaster. We made a big trade. I was hurt. Dame was hurt. Chris was hurt. Like next year will be better. Let's give it another shot. And I do think this nucleus is very, very good if they can ever stay healthy together, but they're getting older and the Celtics ain't going anywhere and other teams are coming for them. And we're going to wash our hands of the Bucks pretty fast here and move on to the second round of the playoffs. And I think the washing of the hands will be of the ilk of like, well, we just never saw the team. Tough luck. Giannis got hurt. Dame got hurt. Yeah, tough luck. Really, really bad season for the Bucks, just all the way around, just from top down. Really, really bad season.
The easiest thing to do is to wipe it away and say, well, Giannis was hurt, especially Giannis, obviously Dame too, but and just say, you know what, you can't draw any conclusions based on that. But that was the case a year ago when they lost in the first round, and it resulted in them making what turned out to be a not so great swap of Drew Holiday for Damian Lillard.
I will die on the hill, just like I died on Julius Randle Hill, just like I'll die on all the hills that I would die on. I pick them very selectively. I will die on the hill of that was a good trade for the Bucks. I understand that Drew Holiday went to the worst possible place for them. I think they had to do something. I think the theory of it was correct. I'm actually kind of surprised that we got to May 3rd and the Dame Giannis 2-man game just never caught the kind of rhythm that we all anticipated it would. I still think it could. I will die on the hill that trade was a good trade. It made sense. It has not worked out yet. I think it was still a good move for them. I may be an idiot. I've been wrong about a lot of things. Yeah. My wife would say that I am an idiot. Maybe I'm just an idiot.
I understood it at the time, and I'll be honest. I cheered it like I think most people did at the time. I talked to a couple people around the league who were a little bit, I would say less enthused. One person I talked to at the time it happened outright said they're going to regret this because whatever gains they make on offense, they're going to more than lose in what they lose on defense and in trading.
Okay, well, the question I would ask that person was the previous version of the team winning a title, and what version? I think that previous version of the team had hit its wall, and what other version is there? Is there a third way? I don't know what that way is. Maybe there was.
By the way, I'm not sure if there's probably precedent for this. Are we seeing the curse of the 2021 finals? The coming out of COVID, buildings still only half full, third full, or whatever, even in the finals. Like the Suns already are unrecognizable. Devin Booker's the only guy left, and they've just been like, withering ever since the finals. The Bucks win a championship, and it's just been one thing after another.
Who's not suffering that curse? Dominating, baby. Dominating. I don't know if you saw his numbers from the last month of the season in Portland. The Blazers, they're still in the NBA, the Blazers, and DeAndre Dominating is putting up numbers, man. He actually, I'm being slightly facetious, but he is. Nobody cares, but he cares. He's dominating. He's a max player. Never ask him another question about it.
I'm gonna always hate that finals anyway because I broke my shoulder in Milwaukee. But I wonder where. So let's start here. There's all the rumors of is John Horst, the GM, potentially going to leave the Bucks to go to Detroit. He's been there throughout this whole thing, and obviously he was in that front office as, like, I don't know, the third or fourth guy on the flow chart when Giannis was drafted. So you're losing potentially some continuity in leadership. So that's, I think, at least interesting or worth noting. Mark Lasry, one of their primary owners, sold his share a year or so ago. It does feel like there's, like this is an inflection point for them. And Giannis signed that extension after they got Dame, just as he signed an extension after they got Drew.
And it runs through 26, 27, to be clear, guaranteed through that. After that, it's player option. So that's three more seasons. As
I wrote at the time last fall, it made some Bucks fans very cranky with me, but I said, like, this is great. And it's nice that it looks like Giannis wants to be there through it all, but there's no permanency in today's NBA. Nothing means, I don't want to sound real nihilist here, but nothing means anything. Like, guys sign extensions and ask out the next day. It happens. Guys opt in and ask out the next day. Like, I'm not predicting it and I'm not hoping for it. I would love to see Giannis spend his whole career in Milwaukee because I think it's better for small markets and for the league's health that stars stay in small markets. But they're teetering here. Like, let's be clear. Like, it's not just Giannis being hurt. It's Brook Lopez having a ton of miles on him. It's that Drew Holiday they've already traded, Chris Middleton, miles and injuries. They have not developed their youth very well. That's something else that another somebody else from around the league had flagged to me. Did
Jay Crowder even get in the game last night?
I don't think so. If he did, I didn't notice. But yeah, like there's not a lot of options here in terms of tools to work with, but they're kind of old and creaky and with a thin bench and haven't done a great job of developing their youth. And they've had 3 coaches in a year. I don't know. I don't know where they go from here. I know that's not great podcast content, but I honestly don't know how you fix this thing. And look, the good news is Giannis is still one of the best 2-3 players in the NBA when healthy. And, he turns 30, I think, in December, but Dame's turning 34 in July. Like, the window for those two isn't great. I also do wonder, by the way, like, there've been, these weren't like strong red flags, but there were moments of the course of the season where there seemed to be some rumblings of Dame unhappiness, whether it was just being in Milwaukee or just the situation or whatever. He and Giannis had their moments, but like, is that partnership so great that we think that's permanent? Could Dame get moved again this summer? Like, I don't think that's crazy to entertain.
Well, Dame was also just good this year. Not an all NBA player. I didn't have him on. Maybe I did have him as the last guy on my All-Star team. I can't remember. But they can't. This doesn't work with a good Dame. They need 1 year of great peak Portland Dame, and they did not get it this year. And there may be a lot of reasons. Like, he's talked a lot about his personal challenges in his life and adapting to a new place. And maybe it was that. Maybe it was just sort of, it's harder than we thought for these two guys to find a rhythm together. Who has the ball? Who gets to run the offense? What's that look like? I don't know. I just think the fix is cross your fingers. Everybody comes back healthy and give it one more go. And maybe we get a little lucky and blah, blah, blah. The other team that's going to be left in the dust here, they're gone from the playoffs. They had no chance against Boston with Jimmy Butler hurt and Terry Rozier hurt, and then Jaime Jaquez Jr. hurt, and Duncan Robinson dealing with a back injury, is the Heat. I think people need to pay a lot of attention to the Heat this offseason. I have no idea what the hell is going to happen there. I never discount the Heat as an on-court product. Like, if they had Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier, we don't really know how much of a threat they might have posed, but they didn't have them. And this is a play-in team every year. Now, to their credit, they got out of the play-in and made the finals last year, which was incredible. And it's also a year old now. I think there's some potential for major fireworks with the Heat. this summer, in part because there's always the potential for major fireworks with the Heat. They're always looking around. They're linked to every superstar. They know they know what they're doing. But it starts with Jimmy Butler, who just wasn't the same guy this year, even when he was healthy. He wasn't as efficient from two. He just wasn't. There were too many games, and he did not play enough games for the Heat this year. There were just too many games where it felt like where you watched and be like, man, he's just not impacting the game the same way. I mean, his impact always transcends his stats, his counting stats. It didn't this year in the same way. And there were too many games where it's like, is he just saving himself? Like, is he just like, this is just a night in the regular season? This team can't really afford that. He has one guaranteed year left on his contract, and then a player option for 25, 26. I think he's 34 years old. I don't have it in front of me.
35 in September.
35 in September. He is eligible, according to Bobby Marks, for a 1-year extension. So that would be opt into his 25, 26 player option and tack on 1 year, $59 million onto that, or a 2-year extension that runs through the same amount of time, but you wipe away that player option. It's 2 years, $113 million. I would love to be in the room for those negotiations, because I think that is about as dicey an extension proposition as there is in the NBA, given his age, his injury history, the fact that the team has had these crazy playoff runs, but also just hasn't been that good on the court in the regular season. And the good news for the Heat is those are short contracts, but they're big. They're big numbers for a guy who's aging the wrong way. And they would nip away at your optionality. It would not surprise me if there were some Jimmy Butler trade rumblings this offseason, if those extension talks don't go well. Because if I'm Jimmy Butler, I want all the money. I saved your franchise. You guys were dead in the water trying to figure out how to dig out of Hassan Whiteside and Justice Winslow and Dion Waiters and all of that. And I want all the money. And I don't know how this is going to go. I know that I just don't know. There are scenarios where, let's just say, the Heat trade Jimmy Butler for some future assets and some other stuff. Like, it's not just future assets. And that gives them the ammo to go out and call the Cavs and say, hey, what about Donovan Mitchell or somebody like that? And then the other going forward as the Heat try to reimagine their team is, Bam, although he's stretched out his shot a little bit this year, took some threes, good mid-range shooter, he's a paint guy. And so you have to find a particular kind of player to fit next to him. But I think this is a potentially explosive offseason for the Heat. And I've, just for my own mental preparation, started to imagine what fake Jimmy Butler trades could look like and who makes sense for him. And our producer, Dan, just said, trade him back to Philly in the chat. And that's the 3 teams on my tentative Jimmy Butler list. I mean, you can go farther and further than that, are Philly, the Lakers. And I've always kind of been enamored with, like, what if the Kings are just like, fuck it, let's go. Like, we got Fox and Sabonis. We're just kind of okay. We need a shakeup. We need some toughness. We need some defense. And we could go on. I mean, I don't think he's a fit there, but I think the Rockets are going to be aggressive this summer, looking for a star player. I think it's going to be a wild summer, but do not take your eyes off the Heat. The Heat are always active, and this is a pivot point for the Jimmy Butler era.
Absolutely, positively agree with all of that. And speculation about Jimmy's future began long ago, before this flame out, before the injuries, everything else. Like, there's been people have felt like the clock was maybe ticking anyway. And listen, like, Jimmy Butler's not your prototypical superstar in this league, right? He's not a 35 usage heliocentric, put up a bazillion points a night, shoot it. Like, he's so different and hard to define. But what he brought to the Heat was enough to make them not just relevant for the last 5 years after, as you note, they were kind of dead in the water, but got them to a couple of finals, made them fun and exciting and interesting. And we could all hashtag Heat culture all day, every day. And he epitomized it. But there's a lot that comes with Jimmy Butler. I'll just leave it at that. And so there's been speculation around the league that maybe this relationship has run its course, and maybe this is the summer when they pivot. It would be the smart time to do it, both for all the reasons you outlined, Zach, about the extension, and the cost and weight of that.
And I believe to add, to make sure I add, I believe they're right at the edge of the second apron already going into next season, according to Bobby.
And this is a franchise like the Heat are really smart. And the idea that they might be try to be one step ahead, sell on Jimmy while you can before holding on for too long, realizing that maybe you've already gotten maybe more than you ever could have expected when you went down this road in 2019. Like they've done pretty well with it. I know it's championship or bust for certain teams, and I don't know if that really applies to the Heat, but yeah, like that's they're all about Larry O'Brien trophies there. But they did pretty well. They made a couple of finals with teams that arguably had very little right to get there, and they've got some interesting young players, and they've got Bam. And I mean, the easy thing to say would be, well, see what you can get for Hero and do some like little stuff around the edges. But I think this is a really strong argument to be made for the idea that they've already gotten as far as they're going to in the Jimmy Butler era, and it's time to pivot. You mentioned them wanting to go get Donovan Mitchell, and of course, like that's the other piece here, right? Like if they kept Butler, do they still have the means to go make a trade for Donovan Mitchell, or maybe they're back in the Dame Lillard business or something? If they're good,
I think they might need more, because that pick they traded for Rozier,
yeah,
it's just another thing out the door. And I like that trade for them. I thought that was a worthy move for them, and I think he would have helped them.
So you were saying Butler for assets, which assets that you then pivot into or parlay into Donovan Mitchell?
As a general model.
Why not just Butler for Donovan Mitchell?
Well, I don't know that the Cavs are interested in that.
No, but look, if there's one thing about the Cavs that's been kind of glaring last year or this year in the playoffs, it's that it seems like they're sometimes a little bit scared of the moment or just a little shaky. Maybe Butler's the guy that Garland and Evan Mobley need next to him. I don't know.
Well, look, we're not going to talk. The Cavs and the Magic play tonight in about 9 hours. So there's no point in really talking about a game that's going to be on the horizon by the time this podcast goes up. But they really responded in Game 5. That was a tough game. Without Jared Allen, Evan Mobley got to move to center and defended Banchero at the end of the game, switched on to him. It was great. They have a chance to wrap up that series tonight. They need, obviously, as I've said with the Cavs all year, they need to win this series. It's a must win, and we'll see if they win it tonight. The other team that it plays later tonight, which we should at least address a little bit, is the Clippers. They are on the brink after they followed a really spirited Game 4 win in Dallas, where James Harden was not just clutch, but super duper clutch down the stretch, making literally every basket except for one, the Paul George corner three. The two of them each had 33 points, I think, in that game. With such a dud in Game 5 at home in LA that I was astonished watching it. They had absolutely nothing. No juice, no life, no flow, seemingly no idea what to do on offense after one action. Just one thing. Okay, I got this switch, and then nothing happens. A lot of Norm Powell on the ball in this series. And I realized that the Clippers' best player is not playing. Has played one game in the series. That's Kawhi, or 2 games rather. Sorry, played one game where he looked decent and one game where he looked in Game 3 just that his knee did not respond well to playing in Game 2. But just absolutely no life. Russell Westbrook has been on tilt the entire series. He's shooting 26%. He has more turnovers than assists. I just don't even know what he's doing out there now half the time. There was a stretch in Game 5 where Ty Lue had Russell Westbrook, Mason Plumlee, and Amir Coffey on the floor together and thought that maybe the Clippers could score some baskets in that alignment. I don't know how that was possible. They just laid down and died. They didn't lay down and die. They just came out with no energy and just farted through 4 quarters in that game. And Dallas blew the shit out of them. And now they play tonight. And maybe they'll win tonight in Dallas. As Ty Lue has said, we've been down 3-2 to Dallas before going to Dallas. Yeah, it took one of the greatest games of Kawhi Leonard's career, one of the greatest individual games I've ever seen anybody play in the playoffs to win that game. But yes, you did do that. If they lose tonight, this will be 5 seasons of PG and Kawhi. If they lose tonight or they lose this series, it will be 5 seasons and 3 playoff series wins total over 5 seasons. If you had told me on that morning in July 2019, when there was a literal earthquake in Las Vegas and they signed Kawhi Leonard and traded for Paul George, that 5 years later, they would have won 3 playoff series and 0 since 2021, I would have said, well, that's a disaster. You're insane. Something horrible must have happened. And what has happened is that Kawhi just doesn't finish any seasons. And like I said before, in regards to Paul George, like, I don't know. They're kind of, just like, James Harden's a free agent. Paul George could be a free agent. Kawhi's been extended. They've traded most of their picks. I think they have the 2031 pick is still sitting there. It looked like this was going to be their best shot at it when they went 26-5 in the middle of the season. They've never been able to recapture that. Now Kawhi's hurt and they're on the ropes. And man, what a gut punch it would be to go out in the first round. I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but that's what's at stake. 3 playoff series wins in 5 years is at stake.
It's staggering. I'll preface this by just saying this: no matter how this ends, and maybe this is the end, and maybe Paul George leaves, and who knows how we'll finally define this particular era. But I will say, as I've said before, this was still a success on some level. Like, I know the playoff success is not there. The Clippers were never a destination. Never, ever, ever, ever. Even when Chris Paul landed there and Lob City became a thing, Chris Paul was trying to get to the Lakers, not the Clippers. Getting Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in the summer of 2019, in addition to, of course, having flushed Donald Sterling and everything that went with him prior to that, the Clippers are different now. And I think, you can't underestimate how important it was, I think, that 2 of the best players in the NBA at that time wanted to go there, did go there. Injuries happened. Yes, Kawhi was already, like, there were physical concerns at the time that they acquired him. It was baked in. You can't foresee all of this. You can't foresee that Kawhi is going to have this kind of this annual thing, this freaking Groundhog's Day that they've gone through, and it's torture for the organization and for their fans and everything else. But it was the right move. It was the right move to go get those 2 guys, and I think it's changed the way they're perceived. And I think others will now see them as a destination in a way that the Clippers never, ever, ever, ever were. And that's not nothing. They're not a championship team or anything close to it without Kawhi Leonard at 100%. That's a given. Paul George is really good. Kawhi Leonard's the one who makes them a potential contender. And so, unfortunately, this postseason, it looks like if they somehow survive this series and move on, do we think Kawhi's going to come back and be anywhere near 100% to try to get to the next round? That seems like a stretch. So I feel like whether it's tonight or whether it's sometime soon, this thing is ending. And I think Paul George, if they offered him max years at max money, I think he stays. I think the fact that he has not signed anything yet means that they have not offered him max years at max money, and he's keeping his options open. I think they want Harden back. As much flack as he's taken, he was incredible for them for a lot of the season. They're not here without him. And there aren't that many other directions they can go, especially heading into a new arena in the fall. But it seems to me like Paul George is going to at least consider his options. Fun dark horse candidate somebody suggested to me, the Indiana Pacers. Feels that would be interesting. Of all the homecomings we've had in this league, that would be fun.
I don't know that they can open up the space.
I don't know if they can either.
I thought you were going to say Orlando, which is
Orlando. I think was also on the list. Yeah. But it does feel like this thing is it's on life support, this era.
It's interesting how things change in the playoffs. After the first 2 games of the Magic Cavs series, you would have walked away thinking, well, Orlando has learned they just need a dramatic injection of talent on offense, even if it takes the ball out of Paolo's hands and Franz's hands. And then they win 2 games and are competitive in game 5. And it's like, you know what? Maybe we kind of hit the brakes on that and more of a hybrid, somewhat off-ball threat like Paul George or somebody of that ilk might be a better fit. The last thing I want to hit, I just really want to quickly say, look, I don't think Darvin Ham did a great job this year for the Lakers. I was on it from the beginning in saying that I just don't understand why they're not starting Reeves and Hachimura together and starting their best 5 players. It took way too long to do that. timeout management, whatever. It's all hindsight with the timeout management with these coaches, like fouling up three, not fouling up three is the same. I haven't liked the coverage of the Darvin Ham situation since the season ended for a lot of different reasons. Number one, the Lakers just can't fire a coach in a normal way. Like, it seems like Darvin Ham's probably going to get fired today, tomorrow. Like, when people are reporting he's like potential firing timelines, and it's the opposite of like when Frank Vogel was just instantly fired, after winning a championship, not directly after, but they just can't fire a coach normally. Number two, there's been some words in some of the Darvin Ham analysis that I have not liked, and have not some descriptive words that I don't think are fair at all. And he's clearly being scapegoated. It's always interesting how there's these anonymous grumblings from players and stuff that come out only after the season. I thought one of Anthony Davis's, to his credit, on the record comments that was in the Athletic story of the Lakers obituary, talking about how, all these players, all these role players who shoot 10% against other teams seem to shoot 40% for us. And I think the implication that the Athletic was trying to suggest was he was kind of criticizing Darvin Ham for being slow to adjust to guys having hot shooting nights against them. Every coach does that. Every coach. The Sixers just did it to Josh Hart in every single playoff game and paid the price. That's every single coach is going to say, well, don't guard that guy. I just feel like he's been, I don't think he did, like I said, I don't think he did a great job. I think he was way too slow to start the guys, but they did make the conference finals last year. They're just not that good. Like they're just a nice NBA basketball team. They won one playoff game. They're not a coach away from winning 3 playoff series, from winning 11 more playoff games. I think they could have done a better. I think Darvin Ham could have done a better job. I think another coach, some coaches might have done a better job. Some coaches might have done a worse job. I don't like the way that he was instantly scapegoated. I don't like the way that he's been written about in some corners. And I'm not quite going Charles Barkley, where it's like, it's the players that are the reason that this and that, because I used to have this back and forth with Van Gundy, where it's like, it's like never the coach's fault. I would poke at him about it. It's like never the coach's fault, but if it's never the coach's fault and it's all about the players, and no coach can win without the players, but then what does actually a coach do? Like you come to this cross, like what is their job then? If they're like, if it's all the players, then why even have a coach? But I do think Darvin Ham has been unfairly scapegoated to an unusual degree, I think.
I think a lot of the specific criticisms of Darvin Ham have been fair. There've been all kinds of things that people have said, written, suggested that, on the merits have something to them. But I agree with you. He's being scapegoated, and the rumors of their intent to fire him were starting even before they were eliminated. And, that's kind of crappy. But yeah, I mean, look, it's been pretty evident for, I think, most people for a while here that aside from LeBron, who just had one of the most incredible seasons we've ever seen, the most incredible season we've ever seen for a guy 39 years old, there is no precedent. Aside from LeBron and Anthony Davis, who, again, also had a great year, how many of those players are guys that other teams would really be clamoring for?
I think Reeves on his contract.
Yes. But is Austin Reeves really, if Austin Reeves is your third best player, you're probably already having some issues, right? Like, here's a fun thing. Take the Lakers Nuggets series and do a draft. And how many of the top 7 or 8 are from the Nuggets roster? Like, after LeBron and Anthony Davis, and it's a bunch of Nuggets. I mean, it's obviously Jokic and then LeBron and Anthony Davis, and then it's all Nuggets for a while. They just don't have that much talent. They don't have two-way players. And
to be clear, they're good. The Lakers are good.
Fine. Yeah,
they're good. A good basketball team.
Yes, but not a contender.
And there's a lot of debates going on about like how close. I mean, they played the Nuggets really well. They led for 75% of the series. They can hang that banner next to the in-season tournament banner if they want.
Did you see the mayor got in trouble for saying she tweeted, "At least we won the in-season tournament," and had to delete it?
Oh God, I didn't see that. It's a good tweet though.
That is a good tweet.
A good X. That's all true. They were competitive. That doesn't mean they're close to winning a title. Like, they won one playoff game, and I understand they drew the worst possible matchup for them. I don't think they'd beat Minnesota. I don't think they'd beat Oklahoma City. I certainly don't see a roadmap in which the Lakers can win 3 playoff series again. I think that's a very tall order and much different than winning 1 playoff game and being competitive in the others. And by the way, LeBron's going to be a year older. Anthony Davis is going to be a year older. And you are never, ever, ever going to get this level of health and availability for both of them in the same season again. So I do think they're going to try to do some dramatic stuff in the offseason because they should. Their takeaway from this season should not be, oh, we're just a small tweak away from getting right back to the finals. It's more than that. But that's all I want to say about the Lakers. Enough Lakers. Howard Beck, what are we looking at from you at theringer.com? I love saying that. Howard Beck of theringer.com.
I love saying that. Thank you. Working on something fun. A couple pieces actually for next week. One for sure, I think coming Tuesday. You know me, I'm weird about actually saying like what the story is about. So just I have something coming on ringer.com on Tuesday.
Right. Okay.
Every Monday on the Real Ones podcast with my buddies Logan Murdoch and Raja Bell. And always on Twitter. It's still Twitter. It's not. Nobody calls it X. Nobody said. I saw a really interesting thing on X today. Did you see that X?
No.
It will always and forever be Twitter. Twitter at Howard Beck.
Howard Beck, it's great to see you. Read all his stuff. Listen to him on Mondays. Thank you for spending a little time on the good old Lowe Post podcast, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Buckle up, baby. Wolves, Nuggets. I've been waiting for this one. Everyone's been waiting for this one. The teams have been waiting for this one ever since their first round matchup last year. No Jaden McDaniels, no Naz Reid. But when I started seeing people from the Nuggets during the finals and later in the offseason, they kept saying to me, something about what that Minnesota team did to us in the playoffs kind of impressed us. Like that's in our heads a little bit going forward. Like that's a team we're monitoring. They figured something out with this Rudy Gobert on Aaron Gordon, Karl Towns on Jokic, have Rudy roam around. And then you throw in the connections between these two teams. And it's actually kind of crazy how incestuous this really is. We know about Tim Connolly moving from Denver to Minnesota. Calvin Booth worked for the Timberwolves before he worked for the Nuggets, brought there by Tim Connolly. Tim Connolly's first draft in Denver, the Nuggets sold the pick that became Rudy Gobert. Tim Connolly's first move in Minnesota was acquiring Rudy Gobert. The Denver Nuggets coaching staff has 2 sons of former Minnesota Timberwolves head coaches, basketball royalty in Minnesota, one of whom, Ryan Saunders, was also the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Minnesota Timberwolves head coach, Chris Finch, was an assistant in Denver during the year of Jokic, the year that Nikola Jokic became the starting center in Denver. Micah Nori, who will be something like the acting sideline head coach if poor injured Chris Finch can't be on the sidelines, was an assistant under Michael Malone in Denver. I'm probably missing some. Well, not only that, I mentioned their first round series last year. If there is a defining pre-championship moment for the Denver Nuggets, it's either Jokic as the official kickoff of this era or Game 82 in 2018, winner take all for the number 8 seed between Denver and Minnesota. And Minnesota won the game, and Denver vowed after the game, we're not going to risk it again. We're going to be better than that. We're not going to be here. And here we are, a year after that first round series, a year after the undermanned Wolves 4-1. I don't want to read too much into it, but if you watch the games, you saw something. The Nuggets saw something, and they've been quietly eyeing each other all season. I think 3 of the 4 regular season matchups were largely useless because players were out, major players were out. But we are here, Denver, with another competitive win over the Lakers, competitive but short. And the Wolves announced themselves as, oh yeah, we're ready for this. We're ready for all the smoke. Punched the Phoenix Suns in the face, punched them again. The Phoenix Suns fell over. The Wolves just punched and punched and punched until the Phoenix Suns quit. And here we are. I could not be more excited for a second round playoff series. This is the NBA Nerds playoff series. Adam Mares from DNVR Sports representing the Nuggets fan community. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. That was a hell of an lead in. I think you touched on all points. You set the table great. This is like Bob Costas back in the day. I'm ready.
Jon Krawczynski from The Athletic, guru of all things Minnesota. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Zach. Now I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop for the Timberwolves since I'm on this pod with you, and we're waiting for what tragedy is going to befall them going into game one since I am on this pod like less than 48 hours before that's going to happen.
Glenn Taylor versus A-Rod in a fist fight. Who wins? Glenn Taylor gets to gets his pick of any weapon that he wants to use against A-Rod. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll just go one by one to each of you. I'll start with you, Adam, because Denver is the defending champions. They're the favorites coming into this series, despite looking just okay by their standards against the Lakers, despite Jamal Murray nursing a calf injury, which did not prevent him, of course, from making two absolutely monstrous game-winning shots in that series. How have you had your eyes on this Minnesota team too, as a Denver guy and a Nuggets guy for the whole season? Have you and what did that first round series like? How did it resonate for you? How are you approaching this series?
And so many of the Nuggets that were on the team last year echoed, which is that did feel like the most competitive series, even though it was only 5 games. They disrupted them in a way that Denver rarely gets disrupted. Now, the Lakers just disrupted Denver in the first round series, so that's kind of interesting. I think it actually mirrors last year's first round series with Minnesota quite a bit. But when you contrast, you brought I like how you set the table with all the different guys on different sides. You also got Monte Morris there. These two teams have played each other more than anyone. I think if you had like Jokic on-court minutes, who has he gone against most in his career? It's probably Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, Karl Anthony Towns. So you're talking about teams and players who are very familiar. But it was fun to watch the contrast between these two teams in the first round, because the Nuggets won last year, and they played with the excitement that Minnesota brought to the table, I thought, this year. Whereas Denver, a more veteran team now, the monkey's off their back, they've won a title. The first round almost felt like a slog, like a chore, like something they had to endure. And I don't know if that is a sign of what will, the energy they'll bring to this next one. But I have a sense that watching Minnesota and watching Denver, you just saw a team that had the excitement of it's our time, we want to get there, versus Denver, who looked a little worn down and like they had to get through it.
John, the Wolves couldn't have been more impressive in the first round. Mm-hmm. And in particular, my question for them all season about their viability as championship contenders. And I was high on them before the season. I had you on. I said, they're going to get home court in the first round. This is going to be a good team. This is going to work this year. Now, I didn't think it would work quite this good, but I was high on them. But all year I said, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to trust Ant and Cat with the ball in their hands under pressure against an elite postseason defense. Now, Phoenix was not an elite postseason defense, but Anthony Edwards just dissected the Suns by just doing the simple thing every time. Calm, cool, not forcing it, not trying to be fancy. You put 2 on me, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker's over here open. I'm just going to hit it to him, and he's going to make the right play, and the ball might come all the way back to me. Karl Towns, some dumb fouls, but also a little bit of calm on offense, not forcing it in the post, not bulldozing people with his limbs flailing and hitting everything in the vicinity and falling over onto the ground. Usage rate a little lower, recognizing his role. Couldn't have been more impressed. The whole Gobert trade was a bet on Gobert, obviously, but it was a bet on Anthony Edwards being ready in short order. Are you surprised how ready they looked in the first round? Are they surprised? And have they been eyeing this matchup just the same way the Nuggets have too?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, personally, I was surprised at not that they beat the Phoenix Suns. I think I picked them in 7 to start the series. I thought that this was a resilient team that was going to be tougher, especially defensively, and get through Phoenix. But I thought, given what we saw in the regular season with how the Suns owned them, that this was going to be a tough matchup, especially when you're going up against shot makers like Durant and Booker in the fourth quarters and all those things. It turned out to be an absolute wipeout. So that was a surprise to me. I don't think it was a big surprise to the Timberwolves themselves, to those players. They were ready for this. And like Adam said, they have come into this playoffs with an enormous chip on their shoulder, with a big hunger to experience something that this organization just almost has never done. And they feel like they are been discounted and overlooked and all of those things. And so, I do think that they are ready for this moment. They're Clubber Lang in Rocky 3 before he faces Rocky the first time. Like, he wants all of it. And so you hit on it, though, crucially, Zach. The stretch of this season when Karl Anthony Towns went out with the knee meniscus surgery, for Anthony Edwards to take that leap, he had to be on his own a little bit in that stretch. And he figured out, because he got so much attention with Cat out, he learned how to handle it, how to make the simple pass, how to get the offense moving, and how to trust that if he makes that simple play, he's going to get it back later in the possession, often in a more advantageous position to do real damage. We all saw in Game 4 against Phoenix the dunk in the fourth quarter, the turnaround jumper over Beal that, everyone says looks like, someone wearing 23, the deep three, like, all those things are fantastic. They're dynamic, they're jaw-dropping. But what makes this team the most dangerous is two people are coming at Ant. I'm going to make a quick pass to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I'm going to drive and make a quick kick to Karl Anthony Towns. And that creates so much easier offense for a team that frankly struggled a lot of the regular season to get that easy offense. So it's been the biggest maturation in his game, and it happened very, very quickly. And I do think it has taken some people by surprise, but it's here now, and I think it's legit. This is not a flash in the pan. He really has an understanding of things right now.
In breaking down the series, let's start with that half of the game. Both these teams can win the title. We've reached now a point where this is a series between teams we know with almost 100% certainty this is two championship level teams. The way Minnesota played in the first round certainly announced themselves. They were third and fourth in the regular season in net rating, and their pedigree with Denver speaks for itself. I want to start on that half because that's the quote-unquote weaker half for either of these teams. Denver was a top 10 team on both ends of the floor, but ninth on defense, a little bit better than that on offense. And Minnesota was an average, kind of clunky offense for a lot of the season, but absolute apex, elite, number one by far defense. So we'll get to that half of it. I want to start with Minnesota's offense against Denver's defense and what to watch for there. In the past, the matchups have generally been KCP on Ant, Jokic on Gobert, and obviously the offense will center around Edwards, Gobert, pick and rolls, and we can talk about how Jokic will defend those and how Denver will defend those. Aaron Gordon, who was, you just can't say enough about what a monster that dude was in the first round. It seemed like every single contested rebound they needed, he got, including the most important rebound of the whole series, leading to Jamal Murray's go-ahead 3 in Game 5. Aaron Gordon on Towns, Michael Porter Jr. on McDaniels, and Jamal Murray on Mike Conley. Adam Mares, I'll start with you. Denver has, over 5-6 years now, refined and tweaked, settled on kind of a default scheme, which is Jokic coming up to the point of the screen and being pretty aggressive on the pick and roll, but added some stylistic variability that has been critical in some of their playoff series, including last year against the Wolves, where they mixed up tactics, but that's what they default with. We're going to put two on the ball. We're going to rotate behind it. Those are what the matchups are going to be. What do you see? What do you anticipate as the biggest challenge Minnesota's offense presents? Or like, what are you going to be watching for those first few Minnesota possessions? How do they attack? How does Denver respond?
I don't even know if it's the first few possessions, because these teams have played each other so much that a lot of the default stuff, I think, is going to go back to default stuff. What's different is Anthony Edwards is too big for KCP, and that was even true last year. But the gap in all the other margins, I think, was wider, that it was like, okay, he's going to go off, and he had a great series, 40-point game, a bunch of 30-point games. He was great in that series, but you could live with it. This year, Anthony Edwards is a better player, and he's a better playmaker, to John's earlier point. So now is KCP a guy that you can put on him and trust him to guard? If not, does Aaron Gordon, because of his size, his strength, and his mobility, does he need to switch over there? And now you have to figure out who's going to guard Karl Anthony Towns. Is it Michael Porter? Are you going to have to stagger more? And then the third layer to all of this is that the Nuggets like to play Aaron Gordon as the backup center in the playoffs, which means, okay, whatever the matchup is, Yoke comes off the court, even if it's only 6-7 minutes, Aaron Gordon's there. now you especially need that because of Naz Reid and the ability to play two bigs off the bench. You're not only going to have to play Aaron Gordon, it's possible in the series DeAndre Jordan, Zeke Naji, somebody else gets a stab at guarding the other big because of how big they are. So now you look at it. I say all that to say, if KCP can guard Anthony Edwards and hold Minnesota's defense to a standard that they think they can outscore, that would be a huge win for Denver. But if not, as I suspect is not the case, who do you go to? Do you play more staggered minutes, something Michael Malone has never liked to do in the Jokic era, where you're bringing a sub out, maybe it's a Michael Porter early or Jamal Murray early, so that you can put a Christian Brown or Peyton Watson on there so you have more defenders to guard all of their players? I think that's going to be one of the real questions early on. So I don't think we'll see it in the first 5 minutes of this game, but certainly in game one, you're going to see how early can Aaron Gordon, does he have to come on the court when Jokic is off? And if so, what does that do to the Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Town defense and all the other minutes?
Yeah, if KCP is just physically overwhelmed, the whole series flips on its head right away. I mean, I rewatched a lot of the film from this season and last season's playoffs. And again, this season, there were a lot of injuries dotting all the games except the very first one. They've still stuck with KCP on Ant for the most part because it's a regular season game. We're not going to play all these cards now. If that changes fast, that's, I think, a bad sign for Denver. John, when Minnesota has the ball, what are you going to be looking for?
Yeah, what I want to see is exactly what Adam hinted at. Will they ever get to a point where they put Gordon on Ant and try to use that size and strength to match up with him? And then, if I'm Denver, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, hey, let's give this a shot and let's see if Karl Anthony Towns will beat us. And, he carries a lot of baggage. He played very, very well, especially in game 4 against Phoenix. And I think really under control, mature, disciplined, all of those things. If he can keep that composure in this series, then the Wolves have a real shot to really kind of have a counter to whatever Denver wants to throw at them defensively because of all of that scoring talent and that shooting talent. But I could see a scenario where Denver says, all right, if Ant is really murdering us and if he's flinging it around and Conley's hitting open threes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker's hitting open threes and all this, let's try and take that away and make Karl Anthony Towns then be the guy. And let's see if he can take that pressure on his shoulders and respond. And so I think that's going to be a big thing. The other thing that the Wolves will try to do, which they have not always had success with and didn't in last series, last season, was take advantage of the few minutes that Jokic is off the court. When you have Naz Reid, when you have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, when you have, even Monte Morris, a few other, they have much more reliable, explosive bench players than Denver does.
Well,
they have to win those.
And just like Jamal Murray will be on the floor for those minutes that Jokic is off the floor, one of Ant and Cat is essentially always on the floor, barring foul trouble, which Cat's got to stay out of. Obviously, it goes without saying at this point that Cat has got to stay out of foul trouble. You almost don't even have to say it. But to your point on the Ant, Aaron Gordon, KCP thing, it's been interesting because even though KCP's been the primary defender on Ant, they're fine and have been fine switching any Ant Cat two-man game, even if it means a guard is on Cat. And I think part of the reason for that is just to your point. You guys want to break your offense to post up this dude who's out of control all the time and knocking people over all the time. Go ahead and do it. We don't care. And if he's more polished at that now, if he plays this series like he did the Phoenix series where he's calm, just take a beat, man. To take a beat, get your elbows and arms under control and calm down, then that becomes a dicier strategy. Adam, do you think last year, Jokic, again, aggressive at the point of attack, take the ball out of Ant's hands, play 3-on-4 behind the play, rotate like madmen, force the Wolves to force Gobert to make plays on the roll like Anthony Davis did in the first round. Can he finish enough plays? Force them to pass it and pass it and pass it until, Jaden McDaniels has to make a play with 7 on the shot clock. Now, they varied that up sometimes. On the side, they'll drop Jokic back. Against Conley, they'll drop Jokic back. Against Ant, they're afraid to do that up the middle because he'll just run him over. But do you anticipate them playing that kind of aggressive style? And I guess from what you've seen, are the Wolves ready as a collective unit to make all those reads and hurt the Nuggets and make all the passes to get to the right shot?
What I think is interesting about that question is if we just stick with the basic pick and roll, which is Rudy Gobert, he's the screener. Denver's gone against Gobert so much that I actually think the details are such. You want him to catch outside the foul line, so you don't want him to allow him to catch too deeply in the paint on those rotations. But then on the catch, I don't think you want to meet him at the foul line. You almost have to push him up, but he is at his worst when he has to take a dribble and pass. So it's almost like you want him to catch, have to put the ball on the floor, and then read the defense. And Denver, I think, has gotten really good at this again because they're so familiar with each other. These types of subtle details are just almost ingrained in the core guys that are playing. Where it gets different is that I think Minnesota now is more equipped with the other guys who screen and roll. And by the way, Dallas is the #1 team that does this. Their pick and roll with Lively and with Gafford, that's great. Traditional pick and roll. But they run it with Derek Jones. They run it with Dante Exum. They run it with non-center guys, and those guys are so good at making plays. So for me, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels represent opportunities of this. I think Denver's going to try to switch those, but there's things you can do to get Rudy rolling and get the ball swinging quickly to those other guys. And that's where I think Minnesota's different than last year, is if you can attack 4-on-3, even if it's not a roll, it's more of a draw the double out and then swing it to those guys. They're more equipped than they were last year to attack 4-on-3 and find the open man. And I think they have guys who are more capable of finishing those plays at the rim or behind the 3-point line.
We saw in the first round against the Lakers, and we've seen it here and there before, sometimes opportunistically by the Nuggets and sometimes out of a position of vulnerability. We saw in game 2 in particular, the Nuggets move Jokic off of Anthony Davis and say, we're guarding Rui Hachimura with Jokic. If you want to hurt Jokic in the screen and roll, you've got to use this guy who's not as good as the guy you were using before, and it's going to screw up your spacing. We even saw him guard Gabe Vincent a little bit in the Lakers series when Rui was not on the floor and they didn't want him guarding AD. And again, we've seen that in a lot of other matchups over the years. He'll guard Kyle Anderson sometimes in this series when Slow-Mo is on the floor. It's hard for them to do that against the Wolves starters, though. I mean, the only reasonable place they could really put him is McDaniels, who, like you said, has gotten better offensively this year. And then you got to juggle the matchup so that Porter's got to guard somebody you may not want Porter guarding. Is there any sort of matchup flexibility for Jokic in this series? Or do you just think this was the 9th rated defense in the NBA? Like, defense is no longer an issue in Denver. Do you just think you just roll it out like you'd normally roll it out?
I think Denver will have to, in moments, put Jokic on, like you're saying. I don't know if it'll be Jaden McDaniels. I think there's other guys. I mean, certainly if Kyle Anderson's ever on the court while Jokic is on the court, that would be the guy. If you're going to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I know he makes a lot of his threes. Denver, I think, has to trust their offense to gain a lead because there's something different about being up 10 against the Suns in game 3 and Nickeil Alexander-Walker making those threes versus being down 0-1 and down 8 points in the third quarter and making those threes. And I think Denver will take those calculated risks and say, we'll win the way you're least comfortable. If you think about this last series with Denver, by the way, the Lakers did this. The Lakers made a conscious decision for all 5 games to quickly double Jokic and say Jokic is so good at beating everyone. But what happens if we compromise our defense in a way, but it'll make somebody else beat us? And Jokic was a rare example of a guy that did it for 5 games. It looked like he was being passive, but I honestly just think he was thinking, if they're going to do this, I have to trust everyone else to beat them. And that's what we're going to do. Does Minnesota have that in them? Because I've been so impressed with how connected they are, how much they seem to play for each other and believe each other. But they haven't been behind in a series yet, and they haven't been underdogs in a series, and it's going to be harder for them to make those plays, swing it to Nickeil Alexander-Walker and trust that he's going to make the right play when you're down 8 points and down in a series.
Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been a revelation for the Wolves, and I've said for a year plus now, like, I couldn't believe that 2 bad teams in Utah and Portland just decided, like, we're just young guard who can play defense really well. Like, we're just not interested. We'll throw them to the side. Couple of things that the Wolves offense, again, which was their shakier half this season, has going for them. They get to the foul line a lot, and Denver's been a little foul prone this year. They also, the Wolves can get a little sloppy with the basketball, as we know, and Denver does not force turnovers. Denver forced the 4th fewest turnovers in the league. So, like, the little edges of this series, you can talk yourself into kind of like this adds up to something for the Wolves. Before we switch sides, John, anything else you're going to be watching Wolves offense, a player we didn't talk about, a play we didn't talk about, anything you want to hit?
Well, I do think that one thing that we didn't talk about a lot yet is Jaden McDaniels, because I do think that a lot of times what you see with opposing defenses is they put their worst defender on McDaniels, and say we're going to dare you to beat us. Now, he did not have a good season offensively through the regular season. He had a hard time finding his role as the fifth option in the starting group. His shots were kind of coming here and there, and he couldn't get into a rhythm. He also did not rebound the ball very well at all for most of the season. And what we saw was a totally different McDaniels offensively against Phoenix, attacking the rim, getting offensive rebounds, coming from the corner and crashing, using his length to create second chances. And if you get that kind of activity and some efficiency in scoring from McDaniels, that makes it much harder to hide whoever your worst defender is. It also makes it much harder to double either Towns or Ant on the touch. And so if McDaniels can continue this offensive momentum from Phoenix into Denver, that really, I think, would be a huge thing for the Wolves. If he kind of regresses to the relative non-factor he was offensively in the regular season, then I can see that this offense getting stagnant, having a harder time kind of getting things going, because he's also one of their best cutters. He breathes some motion into it, and I think that'll be a big key for them.
You hinted on one thing real quick, John, I wanted to touch on, which is Jaden McDaniels rebounding, because
Yes.
I think that's the last leg of this when Denver's on the defensive end is defensive rebounding for Denver and offensive rebounding for the Wolves. Not necessarily a strength, but these things are less about regular season strengths and weaknesses and more about, can you get them into rotation? We're talking about Jokic being out on the trap and the team working the ball around. Scramble defenses don't rebound well, and that's going to be one edge here, because I think Denver's offense is going to score on Minnesota more than Minnesota will score on Denver, but rebounding is going to be a vulnerability, and if you gain 6-7 extra points than expected off of those, that tilts everything else in Minnesota's favor.
And McDaniels, you mentioned his cutting. He's at his best when he remembers how big he is.
Yes.
And if you try to hide a point guard on me, I can kind of cut. I don't even have to cut ahead of him. I can kind of cut through him and finish through him. And he's starting to sort of internalize that. Let's flip to the other end, which is, I think, almost the more interesting tactical battle, because it's the best offensive player in the world against one of the best defensive players in the world, although they will not be guarding each other. Gobert will not guard Jokic all the time. Some of the time he will, and I think those times are going to be important too. But we talked about, you talked about, Adam, how the Lakers, I mean, those were the quickest double teams. They were doubling him when the pass to him was in the air. The double team was already coming, and then rotating to the guy who was one pass away from Jokic to take that away. Jokic can solve that. He's seen that a million times. The Wolves don't want to do that. They don't want to double from in front like that and leave that pass on the perimeter open for him. What they want is, okay, enter it to Jokic in the post, and we'll talk about the pick and roll later. And Towns will be on him, or Naz Reid will be on him, or Slow-Mo will be on him. Sometimes they'll front him and try to mess it up that way. And then Aaron Gordon will be somewhere, and Rudy will be lurking behind Jokic, both doing two things at the same time. Number one, if you try to get anywhere near the rim, I'm going to come over and block this shot. And I'm so long that I can do that while interfering with the passing lane to Aaron Gordon, who's unbelievable, just ducking in, little skulking around. And I'm going to force you. The only pass we're going to kind of give you is all the way across the floor, where we can rotate in while the ball is in the air. Now, I think there's no stopping the Nuggets. The Nuggets have answers to everything. I think Minnesota's hope is slow them down 3 percentage points, and our defense will then put us in range to win. I also think Denver has been holding some cards for this series all season long that they have not used. And those cards will involve where Aaron Gordon is, what he's doing, what Jokic is doing during the stuff that Aaron Gordon is doing, whether I'll just go to you then. What are you looking for? Is this Gobert on Gordon gambit now takes center stage?
I honestly, such an astute observation, because I feel the exact same way, and we'll see what happens. The pick and roll we'll get to in a little bit, but you're talking about Jokic's post touches and Gobert on Aaron Gordon. Last year, the Rui adjustment was this idea. We're going to put Anthony Davis off of Jokic. You saw also in the Philly game late in the season, PJ Tucker guards him. Denver had seen that in small doses, but it felt like a defense that gained momentum against Denver last year. And every team thought, can we do this? Are we equipped to do it? Minnesota, obviously the most equipped. But I think Denver has spent the last year working on this very adjustment. How do we attack it? And to your point, number one, I think Jokic individually has learned, okay, if he's going to be on the right side and I'm posting on the left side, how do I do all of my work on the left side so that if he is going to double, I'm not going to the middle of the court. He's going to have to come all the way out and fully compromise his ability to recover. That's half of it. And then the other half is, if you watch the very first play of this last series or the last game against Minnesota, I think it's a very revealing one. Jokic catches it on the right block. He attacks middle, and Aaron Gordon sets a flare screen. Rather than stand in the corner to space or stand in the dunker, he sets a flare screen. So now Gobert, who's low, it's not guarding Gordon in the corner. It's, do I help out now or just stay there so I can get, Michael Porter running to the corner? And if not, I'm still staying low along the baseline, and Aaron Gordon, after the flare screen, releases to the middle of the court. So it almost puts Gobert in a decision place where he has to make the read before Jokic does. And then it makes Jokic's read obviously a lot easier. So it's little things like that I think Denver has figured out. Okay, if Gobert's going to try to help off, use Aaron Gordon as something else, and then cut him to the middle of the basket where Gobert's not trying to recover. And it's had some success. But to your point, it's interesting to me too that Denver didn't do it very much. And I did take note of it of, wow, that works so well. You got an Aaron Gordon dunk out of it. You got this out of it 3-4 times. And then they go away from it. It definitely felt like something they were saying, we're going to save this for later.
We haven't seen Aaron Gordon as a pick and roll ball handler hardly at all in the playoffs or even in leading into the playoffs. I think we're going to see it more in this series for this reason, to engage Gobert, get him away from the rim a little bit. And to your point, I mean, these are the easy solutions. Like, Gobert's ignoring Aaron Gordon, use him as a ball screener, use him as a ball screener for Jokic, use him as a ball screener for Jamal Murray, use him as a flare screener off the ball. Like, you're 15 feet away from me, I'm going to hit Anthony Edwards with a flare screen, and Michael Porter Jr. is going to be open. And by the way, the one weak spot in Anthony Edwards' defense is losing track of shooters, and expect Denver to really test that out with him on Michael Porter Jr. But that's where the chess match kind of really starts. And I just think it's not even just Gobert, who's huge, and Towns, who's huge. But John, you can speak to that. It's that other than Conley, they're huge across the board. And so even if Jokic finds some solutions, even if a screen cracks open some daylight off the ball, no team is better equipped than the Wolves to close those openings faster and with longer arms and everything than Minnesota is. I mean, this is good. When Denver has the ball, I mean, anytime Jokic is involved, it's like a chess master solving a puzzle from 10 steps ahead. This is the challenge that Jokic and the Nuggets have been waiting for, and the Wolves have been waiting for it too. This is the most interesting half of the series.
Without question. And I think that here is where what has been most successful for the Timberwolves with this grand experiment of all going big. I think conventional wisdom would be, if you go this big, you're going to be slow. And that is not what this Wolves defense is, because they're so connected. Not necessarily that Karl-Anthony Towns is super mobile or Rudy or whatever. It's that all five pieces on the floor, whether it is Conley at the point or Nikhil or whoever you want to put there, they all know where each other is going to be after playing so much together over the last year and a half since Conley arrived in the trade and Nikhil arrived with him. So when you watch this team rotate and recover and scramble, they are not scrambling with their heads cut off. They are not trying to just guess where the ball is going to go, and they're not losing each other and saying, wait, I thought you were going to be there and I'm supposed to be here. They are connected that way. And so that allows them to use their length to the greatest advantage, because they are generally in the right positions as well. And you can see, I think it will be different. This will be by far their biggest challenge with Denver, but with the offenses that they play, the longer the shot clock goes, the more you can see a look in the offensive player's eyes of, where do we go? We can't find the opening.
It's some of the only moments where I've ever been able to see Jokic thinking from, if not a step behind, then in sync with the defense. Like, okay, I gotta find stuff there. They're one of the only teams that makes his decision making even a teensy bit cloudy. I'm sorry, you were going to continue.
And building on that though, Zach, building on that point, where you saw the Lakers do things philosophically where it seemed like we're doubling quick, we're going to try and get him moving it sooner. The Wolves in general have done it a little differently. In the 4 games this season, Jokic had, let's see, 3 assists, 2 assists, and then he had 7 assists and 5 assists. That is not the Jokic that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing him orchestrate 12 assists, 15, 10, just rack those things up. And so it seems like so far the Wolves have said, we are going to put Karl Anthony Towns on him. And if he scores 40, just like kind of Kevin Durant, if you score 35, okay, we just can't let Devin Booker and Eric Gordon and Beal go off. I think it'll be a little bit similar approach here where if Jokic scores a lot, and he had the one huge game, the 41-point game late in the season, but they're going to try and say, okay, we can't have Michael Porter Jr. having 25. We can't have Jamal Murray being super comfortable and being settled in that way. And so will that work? I don't know, but that's generally, it seems like the approach that they have taken is trying to change Jokic from the puppet master into more of a score heavy guy and then limits the damage that others can create.
If we concede that, though, when we just said that Karl Anthony Towns' foul trouble is an issue here, can Karl Anthony Towns guard Jokic, and then can he guard him, while being extra careful not to foul? That even lowers his effectiveness another 20% or so. So I think that is one of the battlegrounds for me, because I agree with you that I think that is largely their strategy. But when Jokic sees that strategy, he becomes hyper aggressive. And if Cat is trying to not to foul, those are easy points for Jokic. So that'll be an interesting dynamic as well.
And the problem the problem with that with Cat is, he may commit fouls on Jokic on defense, but he also generally commits a lot of fouls offensively. And that's what makes it so hard. That's why he has to be in control and composed. He cannot pick up 2 charges, hook the guy as he goes by, because that's taking away from fouls that he's going to commit on Jokic on the other end.
Those are the ones you can't have, the illegal screens, the dumb offensive fouls. You're going to commit fouls on defense. That's the reality of being a big man in the NBA playing against a guy like Jokic. You're going to commit fouls. You're going to need to commit fouls. You just can't commit them on offense in situations where you're really not even accomplishing anything by doing it. We need an acronym that just stands, we need to turn Karl Anthony Towns needs to avoid foul trouble, whatever that acronym is. Everybody can just put that in their columns as just a standalone in every playoff series. A couple of other things that I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see a little bit more Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon pick and roll to involve Gobert and bring him up a little bit. And if you can get around him or get by him, then there's not as much resistance at the rim. Now you say that and you think, well, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon pick and roll, that's a cool play. What's the best offensive player on the planet doing during all that? We're not just going to make Nikola Jokic a floor spacer. And I think, and there's just little glimpses of it here and there. I think what we'll see when Denver is really engaged is when Jokic is not directly involved in the on-ball action, as either the ball handler, the screen, or whatever, something else is going to be happening with Jokic at the same time as the on-ball action is going to happen. So I can see things like Murray Gordon pick and roll at the same time, a cross screen under the rim for Jokic, so that Murray turns the corner, Jokic pops into post-up position, everybody's occupied on the defense. I could see a Murray Gordon pick and roll or a Murray post-up. He's had success posting up Conley, and Jokic flare screen, or Aaron Gordon flare screen, or you saw Aaron Gordon pin down for Jokic. He's so versatile. I think we'll see a lot of simultaneous stuff from the Nuggets when they're really engaged. And then the other thing that's obvious is, and I think this is a big pivot point, is Jokic is going to guard Gobert on defense. That means when they get stops, Gobert is going to be on Jokic a lot. They're not going to be able to get to the Gobert on Gordon thing every single time. When Gobert is on Jokic, that's when I'm spamming the Murray Jokic pick and roll. I'm putting Gobert in every pick and roll. He can do it. He's capable of it. He's been awesome this year in open space, but I'm going to make him guard a lot in space, and I'm going to mix in a lot of pops for Jokic. I'm going to mix in a lot of pops, and I'm going to see how Gobert responds. He's going to close out short, and a lot of these games, some of these games might come down to Jokic has historically been an incredible postseason 3-point shooter. I don't know what happens to him. And then if Gobert starts to close out, the pump and go and drive. But when that matchup happens, That's what I would do if I were Denver. I would just spam that pick and roll even more than usual. But Adam, what else what are we missing on Denver offense? We've been focusing on this Jokic chess match. What else should we be looking at?
Well, 2 notes on that real quick. I do think cross matches will make a big difference. I would suspect that Denver's offensive rating is going to be significantly higher this series when they get a stop and go the other way. Anthony Edwards, and we already talked about KCP guarding Anthony Edwards and how that creates some things, and then the Jokic Gobert part. And then the other part is, I agree with you about pitting Gobert in the pick and roll. Even if you think, what is the best player in the world doing? He's offensive rebounding, which is also one of his elite skills that he does less of nowadays, because he's the fulcrum of the offense. But if you bring Gobert out there, all of a sudden that becomes a strength for Denver, crashing the board. So that's one of them. But the big story for me of this whole series, all this stuff we talked about, to me is secondary to this one point. Jamal Murray is such an important part. He's half of Denver's offense. Even if Yoke's the best player on earth, Jamal Murray is half of the dance that they do in that pick and roll. And he did not look like himself in that first round. He got hurt after the All-Star, but Denver played. I was certain Denver was winning the title back-to-back after the All-Star break, 15 games after the All-Star break. They looked that good on both ends of the floor. And then Murray gets hurt. He misses 9 games. He comes back at the very end, has a couple good games, and you say, okay, he got it. But in that first round, he clearly didn't have the explosiveness that he had in previous seasons. Is that because he's working his way back? Then he gets the calf strain. That, to me, is going to be such a big story, because Jaden McDaniels is a better defender than anybody that was on the Lakers. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a better defender than anybody that was on the Lakers. And both of those guys are so good specifically at the pick and roll. Something's going on the street behind me. I don't know if you guys hear it, but there's clearly something going on. But anyway, those 2 guys are great at the pick and roll, and that's obviously where Denver starts. If those guys are able to get through screens the way I think they will be able to, and if they are able to stay connected enough, you don't have to get into major rotation if you are the Minnesota Timberwolves. And more to the point, that means Murray has to punish guys that are a quarter or half step behind, which he's very capable of when he's fully healthy. But he did not do that against the Lakers. I got guy on my hip, so now how do I punish him? There's little shimmy moves that he does. His nickname is Glitch. He's so good at those 4 or 5 quick moves in a row, and then he generates separation. He had none of those in the first round outside of 2 game winners. But other than that, I think he's going to have to do that 7, 8, 9, 10 times a game in this series. And I'm just not sure if he's healthy enough for it. It's one of my big questions.
To your point, if Murray is healthy, I'm pretty confidently picking Denver in this series, probably in 6. I might even flirt with 5, just not disrespectfully to Minnesota, just because home court. It's just more likely. If I'm not going to pick 7 and I'm going to pick Denver to close at home, that's what I would pick. With Jamal Murray in his current state, I think this is a winnable series for Minnesota. I'm not sure it's quite a toss-up, but I think the Wolves can absolutely win this series. Before we make our picks, a couple of things. You mentioned transition. I've said this before. The scariest sight in the NBA is Jokic getting a defensive rebound, twirling, and going up court in a 5-on-4. You are dead. Your only recourse at that point is to pray that somebody misses an open 3 or a layup at the rim. You're dead. And Minnesota's biggest leap from good defense to great defense was cleaning up all the sloppy stuff that used to undo them. And number 1 was bad transition defense, which is sometimes endemic to being a bigger team, a slower team. They've been good in transition. They're going to have to be buttoned up there. They're going to have to be buttoned up on the boards, which again, they're 9th in defensive rebounding this year. John, you know well, that was one of their many weaknesses, even last year with Gobert. Denver is an elite offensive rebounding team with Jokic on the floor, not with Jokic off the floor. They got to clean those up. But the last thing on Denver's offense is, we're talking about Murray's health and all this chess match. They shot horribly from 3 against the Lakers. I think 31% on threes. They took the fewest threes in the entire league this year. It's incredible how good they are at offense, because if they shoot like they shot against the Lakers and they take so few threes, they are, even with the best offensive player in the world, nearing this critical threshold of modernity where you're just not taking or making enough threes. They're going to have to make more threes in this series than they did against the Lakers. I have nothing else to say. Do you guys want to make picks? Is there any final point that you wanted to make that we didn't hit?
Yeah, Zach, I would just say quickly, one thing that is going to be crucial for the Timberwolves in this series is to try to have a lead late in games, because when you get into the last 5 minutes, 4 minutes against Jokic and Murray, they are going to get a great shot every single time. And one of Minnesota's bugaboos has been generating good looks late in games against set defenses. And so if it turns into that, if it turns into an execution match, the Wolves are going to get executed. Like that's the big thing. But
unless Ant just goes ham in crunch time, which
unless
like
he does.
Ant's reached a point where he could just single-handedly win a high leverage playoff game against even a team as good as this.
He can win a game, but it's not. I don't know if it's a recipe for winning a series. So that I just think that's going to be crucial for them. Being in a position of strength so that they can set their defense in the half court and lock in those last 5 minutes and just make it really, really tough on them.
All right, I'm going to make a pick. Are you guys going to make picks? Do you make picks? I don't want to force you into picks if you're not going to make picks. And if
why not? Let's have some fun.
Sure. Why not? Let's do it.
Who wants? Adam, you get you as the resident of the team that won the championship, of the city of the team that won the championship. Yeah. You get to defer or accept the ball, so to speak, in making picks.
I've been surprised at how bullish a lot of even like the gambling sharps and even in Vegas has been on the Nuggets here. I'm going to pick Nuggets, and I'm going to say Nuggets in 7. But I think that this is an incredible series, and it really comes down to me for Jamal's health. Jamal, to me, Game 5 was a symbolic game for him because he wasn't healthy, but he overcame it. And I think that is a trait of the Denver Nuggets, is they are a team that adjusts to whatever the circumstances call for. They don't always do it the way that they do it, but they find a way to get through it. I think this is the biggest challenge they will have faced between last year and this year. But I'm going to pick them to get it done. I think both teams split their first 2 home games, and this becomes a 3-game series, and Denver closes it out with their home wins.
Mr. Krawczynski?
Yep, I will, probably not surprisingly. I just think that the Wolves have been resilient all year. They've never lost 3 in a row. I think that they have more options to go to if things go wrong than Denver does. And so I think that they'll have a little bit more flexibility and versatility to combat whatever happens in the series. I love the way that Ant's playing at this point. And so I think he can take over a game or two. And so I'm going to say Wolves in 7. And, I think conventionalism would be Wolves in 6 if you're going to pick the Wolves, have them win at home. But I just think that this series is going to be so close. And I love the Nuggets. I think they're so well coached. I think they're so just freaking good, especially late in games, that I just can't see this not going the distance. And I think these two are going to slug it out, and the Wolves are just going to find one little bit of extra defensive intensity to push them over the top.
I'm going to go Nuggets in 7. I think this is absolutely on the table for the Wolves to win. To Adam's point, I should have said this at the open. This is the best team Denver has faced in the playoffs across these last 2 seasons, and I'm not even sure it's close. It's a completely winnable series for Minnesota. They're healthier. They're probably deeper. They have elite high-end talent. They have everything you need. I'm going Denver just because they have championship experience. They have home court advantage, and they have a great home court advantage. They have the best player in the world, and Minnesota's best player is 22. It is a huge ask for Anthony Edwards to carry this team over the Denver Nuggets in the second round. He doesn't have to carry him. He's going to get a lot of help, and I'm picking Nuggets in 7. He can obviously do it. It would be so goddamn impressive if Minnesota would win this series, even if Jamal Murray is 75%, 80%, whatever he is. And maybe this layoff helped him a little bit. I don't know if that's the case or not. I just don't know. I'm just going to default to the champs in 7 at home, but I think this is going to be an unbelievable series, a battle, and the winner is going to come out of it maybe favored to make the finals, maybe favored to win the championship, maybe not. You can't discount Oklahoma City or whoever gets out of that Clippers Mavs series, but this is going to be a war, and it's one that it just seemed inevitable. Like these teams were going to face off again, and I'm super duper excited for it. You guys, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. Your teams are gearing up for this, the teams that you cover, the beats that you cover. Adam Morris, DNVR Sports, Jon Krawczynski at The Athletic. There just aren't guys doing a better job than you guys do covering your teams and covering the league at whole. But everything you guys do, I mean, Adam, I can't even keep up with all your podcasts. You stole Tim Legler from us. That's how goddamn good you are. John, your coverage of the Wolves is unbelievable. Guys, buckle up. This is going to be fun. You guys ready to have some fun?
I cannot wait. I've been waiting for this all season as well. It's a nice rivalry because there's history here. It's going to be so fun. I love going to Denver. Like, I love all that. So I'm ready, man. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be a great series. I'm really excited, and I think the NBA is going to enjoy this one. NBA fans.
Thank you, guys. Adam Mares, Jon Krawczynski, thank you for your time. I will see you down the road.